Welcome to DMM Downloads. We are podcasting another conversation about DMM between Jeff Crabtree and me, Rudy Rivera. Jeff and I are teamed together in Northern Colorado in a ministry we call DMM NOCO. DMM NOCO is unleashing disciple-making movements in Northern Colorado, and we thought it a good idea to start a podcast as a way to bring awareness and resourcing to ordinary people who are passionate about making multiplying disciple makers in our natural networks. Thanks for joining us in this journey. We hope you get a DMM download from this conversation. Hey, Jeff.
Rudy.
We are back, and it is another Thursday. Yeah,
Thursday today. I was thinking about it though, Rudy.
Yeah.
Our listeners don't know, but we're usually in your living room today.
That's right.
We're in my basement.
Wow.
So we're climbing the ladder in the sense of success. We have different studios.
That's true. Two studios. Wow, Jeff. DMM Downloads now has two studios. Welcome to our world, guys, if you're listening. Thanks for listening. We're actually still in Timnath, though, because you and I live in the same town,
Colorado.
Different neighborhoods. And it's another beautiful morning here in Timnath, Colorado.
Correct?
Yeah. And so we're continuing our downloads, guys. And, these are meant to be short and hopefully asking a lot of good questions and trying to engage the things that really you and I are discussing off camera, off a microphone, and the things that we're learning. And specifically the things that Jeff is trying to kind of just maybe put together for us here in Northern Colorado. So I walked into his house today, and Jeff said, listen to this, I'm working on this thing, and I want to turn it over to Jeff and have you explain to everybody. What are you working on, Jeff?
Yeah, I won't be able to give the complete backdrop, but I think I've said on previous podcasts that I spent 40 plus years leading churches, and then recently, 9 months ago, I went on staff, kind of semi-retirement here. I'm an older guy, but went on a staff of an existing church, and I'm their disciple-making pastor. And so trying to embed, laying in some foundation or framework for disciple-making movements in a, what do we call it, a traditional legacy, attractional church. But so after 9 months, I was trying to think, okay, I want to give them a roadmap in how to lay in some foundation and framework. So I've been working on a document that I'm going to call the 8 E's. Every word starts with the letter E. 8 E's of implementing movement principles in a local church. And so I was in the middle of that, so that's why we got talking about the discussion. And the first E, is to engineer a paradigm shift. Because what we have learned and come to accept as culture of Christianity, maybe, or culture of church in a Western setting is much different than what the idea of disciple-making movements are. And so I just thought maybe we would lean into that a little bit for our listeners, is how do you engineer a paradigm shift? And it's not just in the local church. It's got to happen in an individual. It happened in you.
Yeah.
It happened in me. And so I thought maybe just this engineering a paradigm shift might be something that our listeners might gain from. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like it because, here in Northern Colorado, you and I, and it's your leadership, but I come along. We engage people with training opportunities, and so we've been doing these kind of meetings to kind of introduce kind of a 30,000 foot level. This is what disciple making movements are. If you're interested in what you've heard tonight, join into the training times. And you got that question, I think, like a week or two ago. Like, what's the difference, Jeff? Or what are some differences? How should we be thinking about these things? And why would I, as a Westerner church person, need to kind of consider these thoughts? And that's kind of what I think sparked it, right? Like you were trying to answer the what or why or what are the differences. So yeah, take it away. Tell us more about like a paradigm, because there's a lot of paradigms. Probably. So,
well, I think we're going to try to serve our listeners maybe and now in future podcasts have kind of take some of these paradigm shift principles and and unpack them a little bit and look at them, and maybe they will help. I guess I'd like to say before we kind of lean into that is that when we're going to try to give some contrast between what we'd call maybe Western church or Western Christianity versus a disciple-making movement principle or mentality, we're not saying that one's right and one's wrong per se. You get into that and it's a slippery slope. I think what we just say is that it's where you put emphasis and priority. And so where a lot of Western Christianity or Western church places their priority emphasis would be different than where we do in a disciple-making movement mentality or mindset. So I just want to clarify that we're not saying one's right and what's wrong, but we are saying that where you place emphasis and priority is important, and we place that in a different place in disciple-making movements. So the first one that I think would be good, hopefully for our listeners, is because DMM, disciple-making movements, we usually say it's obedience-based discipleship. And so the contrast from kind of Western Christianity to a DMM, disciple-making movement mentality, is in the West, we're very knowledge-based, where in DMM, we're more obedience or application-based. You and I, Rudy, have been in the faith a long time. We both pastored, and so we know that kind of the model is, let's see if we can just give people more biblical information, whether that's Sunday morning or Bible studies or Bible classes or whatever. But we emphasize so much about knowledge that we seldom help people go, okay, how do you obey or how do you apply what you've just learned? I'll use just a little bit of description. You and I were preachers, but we go on Sunday morning, most people that go to church, and we do all the different things. We say hi, we eat coffee, donuts, whatever we do. We have a little worship set. And then what do we do? We listen to the preacher or the pastor or the teacher spend 25 to 40 minutes, depends on who they are. And what do? They dispense biblical knowledge. They preach or teach about biblical knowledge. And then we all say, great, thank you, however we close our service, and we go home and we go to our own lives. And both of us over 40 years in ministry is like, how did that work for us? Did we really see people really grow in being more like Jesus? I mean, that transformation element, which is another one we'll talk about. So again, if I can try to make it clear, is one of the ways in engineering a paradigm shift is we have to lean into the difference between being a knowledge-based church or knowledge-based Christianity and see if we can move the needle over to obedience-based or application-based. Did I cloud that up? Did I make it clear? How do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I don't know if I can add on. I mean, I've got examples in my head of what you're talking about, both personally and observations. But here's a thought maybe. Let's say for the people that are listening that are really, thinking, Jeff, what about loving the Lord our God with all of our mind? Any thoughts to that? How are you, fitting what you're saying, the paradigm shift into that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I think I'd go back to say again, we're not saying one's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
We're adding more emphasis or priority to. We need knowledge. I read my Bible every morning, and to be honest, I gain knowledge. What I don't do, and again, I'm still going to have a paradigm shift. I have it in my head, but not always in my application, is, okay, from what I read, what am I going to obey? What am I going to apply? Because knowledge doesn't necessarily lead to transformation, but we believe obedience does. And so I think, again, we are living in a Western culture that's highly intelligent and good for that. Thank God for that. I celebrate that. The point being is if we don't obey or apply, it doesn't make a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Let me quickly say, because I'm a golfer and grew up in a golfing community, my brother was a professional golfer, so golf has been my world. If someone comes to me and says, Jeff, teach me about golf, and I give them all kinds of downloads of grip and swing plane and what to be thinking and what to do and what not to do, and yet they never apply it, they never do it, I'm really not helping them be a better golfer. I'm just giving them information. And that same kind of thing happens, I think, in church, is that we give them all kinds of biblical information, but we don't always help them apply it. And so there's this gap that keeps them from truly being more like Jesus.
Yeah. Well, that's actually really well said to me, or at least it speaks to me, because I'm just thinking of 1 Corinthians 13 for whatever reason, but knowledge puffs up, love builds up. And so like the idea of like more knowledge tends to not lead to transformation. It tends to not lead to an increase in love. It doesn't, I've even heard it said, cynicism is tied to knowledge, for example, because the more you know, the more you realize how bad it is, And so, like, as Westerners, I think we swim in knowledge. I think it's just common, and maybe more so now than ever with AI and with, all the tools that are, like my phone has the world's information at my fingertips, And so knowledge is all around us, but then how do we obey what we know? And that's maybe the discrepancy. And I've told you this before, and I've maybe shared it on a podcast, but the year was like, I don't know, 2001 or something, and I'm sitting in a group full of like ministers and missionaries, and 40, 50, 60 of us, whatever, and an African pastor stands up at the end of a week of being with us and says something to the effect of, you Americans know a lot and do very little. We Africans, this is a long time ago, we Africans know little and do what we know. And I've just always, that's just always stood out to me. It wasn't even an indictment. I think it was just an encouragement. Like, guys. Observation. Like, guys, do what it says,
Sure.
And that makes sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me to be a doer of the word, not just an accumulator of knowledge, is a paradigm shift, because Americans, that's just the air we breathe. It's knowledge is at our fingertips, and we're kind of proud of that, being able to have a lot of information.
Yeah, and I would just say paradigm shifts aren't easy, and they don't go quickly. I know for me, I say that it was probably a year and a half of reading and being around DMM people and watching, videos. It takes a while. I know we don't like the word deconstruct. We live in a world of deconstructing their faith. But there has to be some bit of deconstruction and not leave it there, and then reconstruct, and that's what we're saying here. And I know that in this paradigm shift of knowledge versus obedience, we find in the movement world that there's some pushback, like, oh, you're wanting me to be a legalist. Obedience is legalism. Well, we say, what's Jesus' love language? Gary Chapman's 5 languages of love will pull off of that. What's Jesus' love language? He said, if you love me, you'll do what? Gain more information about me? He said, no, if you love me, you will what? Obey. You'll apply because I have your best interest in mind. So I just simply say, as we talk about this paradigm shift, we're not asking you to move over into legalism. We're asking you to move closer maybe to application and obedience, which not only honors the Lord, but allows you then to grow more in your Christ-likeness.
Okay, you just sparked a thought here, and I'm gonna botch. Is it Romans 12? I think it's 8 or 12. Anyhow, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds, right? But he goes on to say, I've always been fascinated by this portion where he says, then you will be able to test and approve God's will, that it's good, pleasing, and perfect.
Right.
It's by the testing, it's by the doing that you actually prove the will of God is true, right, and good, right? So it proves itself to be true. God's will proves itself to be true as we apply it and take it into action. And where I'm going with that is to say, and I'd love to hear a response as we kind of close soon, I think I wonder, let me say it that way. I wonder if the paradigm shift you're talking about is it, like, for all of us who are listening, including me, what did you acquire knowledge-wise today, and do you do it? If you begin to do it and apply it, the paradigm will take place that
Correct.
God's word is true and I ought to obey. It's not good enough to say God's word is true
Correct.
and to do nothing with it.
Yeah, great.
Is that a paradigm? I mean, is that?
I think so. And again, paradigm shifts, and this paradigm shift, we could take a lot more time, but we're trying to give a little bit of a taste for people. But I think we'll probably be coming to an end here. But I would like to say, maybe all of us who have been parents, the goal was not to give our kids instruction, knowledge. It was that we wanted to give our kids instruction and knowledge so that as they applied it, as they obeyed it, they would gain the reward of what it means to align with that. And so we can use that in our personal family thing, but then sometimes when we transition over into the religious world or the church world, we don't pull the whole thing over.
Yeah.
We're just keep giving instruction, but real life and power and transformation doesn't happen simply in, like with our kids, in giving them information. It's supplementing that with an encouragement and discipline, if need be, if you will, of them applying or obeying, because that's where the reward is.
Yeah. So we started off by saying you're talking about engineering. What's your language there?
Engineering a paradigm shift.
Engineering a paradigm shift. So for everyone listening, hopefully this download is helping kind of start the process of engineering a paradigm shift, whether it be in the church or in the individual.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Rudy.
Thanks, Jeff, for that engaging download. In DMM, we like to say that disciples are learners. I know I'm learning a lot from my conversations with you, Jeff. From all of us in DMM NOCO, we hope you got a DMM download from the conversation today. Don't forget to leave this podcast a review wherever you are listening online. If you found this conversation helpful, please head over to our site, dmmnoco.com, where you can find more content for your DMM journey, including a self-paced Habits of a Multiplying Disciple course. The course is designed to give you practical next steps to becoming a DMM practitioner and multiplying disciple maker. You can take that course for free at dmmnoco.com. We will be back next week with another engaging DMM download episode. Until then, may you hear from God through His Spirit and take simple steps of obedience in what you hear.